Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get this show on the road. So I think they've already done all the audio checks. So are they? Okay. All right. So welcome to this hybrid MetroPlan Orlando meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I am Commissioner Viviana Janer from Osceola County, and I'm also chair of this board. We have several board members physically present to make our quorum, and the rest of them are joining us virtually up on the screens. I'll ask all board members attending in person to please speak clearly so that those joining us virtually can hear. We are all wearing masks, so we'll need to make just that little extra effort to ensure good audio quality. Board members joining us online will participate in the discussion and vote on action items, and the public will be able to participate virtually as well. Now it's time for our Pledge of Allegiance, and I will ask Mayor Nelson if he'll do us the honor.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. So just as a reminder, we do have two opportunities for public comment during the meeting. One comment on action items towards the beginning of the meeting, and a general comment period at the end. If you would like to comment, this is how you do it. And so there should be instructions on the slide, so you could read that, especially on the phone. If you want to raise your hand, you do *9. Also, you may have noticed we have new AV equipment. So this is a big change, a big improvement, long overdue. Each of you have a monitor in front of you, and I'm going to call on Jason to go ahead and walk us through.
Okay, good morning, Chairwoman, board members. As you can see, we have a brand new system today. I just wanted to take a few minutes to go over why we got it and how to use it so everyone knows what they're doing. I also wanted to take a second and point out that we have Chet with Reliance AV here today. His company is the one who installed the system. I'm happy to have him here today because we're still kind of learning things. So if we have any glitches, he'll definitely be here to help us sort those out. Next slide, please. So we got a new system for three main reasons. One, it was just getting old. We brought it from the old building. We started having pieces of equipment fail. And it was costing us kind of more to upkeep it than it was really worth. We also wanted the ability to do live streaming, and with COVID, that became more of a necessity. And then finally, we wanted some more accessibility options for people who had hearing or sight impairment. Next slide, please. So the main thing changed for you all is going to be this new display. It's an all-in-one device. We call it, those are called Taden units, manufacturer's Taden. In these devices, there is a microphone, there is a speaker, a camera, and a screen. So kind of all-in-one, can do a lot of things. You'll be able to access agendas on there. You'll be able to, we'll be able to push stuff to you as if you already signed in, you'll see that you could see this presentation on that screen right now.
So Jason, I'm going to ask you a question. I don't have a presentation up on my screen, so what do I do?
Have you signed in yet? Have you pressed the sign in button?
Yep.
Okay. What you could do is there's a VOD button there. If you hit that, and at the top left, there is a
HDMI in?
yes. You press that, and that should.
Okay, because Commissioner Reba had the same issue. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I forced it to you earlier, but if you had not signed in before I did that, then that was probably why. But there's always a way to access it there. So we also now have the ability to live stream, use Zoom, YouTube, anything that comes along on the internet after that, we should be ready for. These all have built-in cameras. We also have a camera in the back of the room, so we could display the whole room if we need to. There's new accessibility features, one being hearing devices for the audience. So if an audience member comes in and they have trouble hearing, they can use these devices. There's a little hearing headset for you, or if they have hearing aids, we have these loop systems that they put on and it connects to their hearing aids. And then there's also an app with that. This is a company called Williams Sound, and there's an app people can download onto their smartphone, and they can listen to it if they're on our Wi-Fi, just as if they were using these devices. So if we run out of devices, there's still other ways for them to listen. In the Taden units themselves, there is a headphone jack in there as well if someone had hearing issues. And then when I show you in a little bit, we're going to have the agendas or other documents digital on here, and you'll be able to kind of zoom and enlarge those. So people who have sight impairments can still view an agenda at a larger size. So we have some projector flexibility. As you can see, this one is off right now, and that's for some lighting issues we're dealing with the camera, and we didn't want to wash out the chairwoman's face, so we turned that one off. But we can send different things to different projectors. We weren't able to do that before, so it gives us a little more functionality. And then finally, at many of the tables there, you'll see these round discs in the center, and those have electrical outlets and USB. And you can kind of rotate that top and expose those electrical outlets. So if people needed to charge a tablet or a phone. And then that top disc itself is a wireless charging unit. So if your phone has that capability, you could just drop your phone on there and it'll start charging. So those are many of the main features that you all see. There's a lot of stuff on the back end that just works on its own because of Chet's magic. So there's that. Next slide, please. Now to talk about these Taden units for the people on Zoom, you can see what they look like. These are the screens in front of everyone in the boardroom. You're going to see one of two screens when you first come in. You'll either see this screen here if we haven't done seat assignments. And if you hit next slide, you'll see what it looks like when we have seat assignments. So when you come in, if you see your name there, all you have to do is press that please sign in, and we can keep attendance that way in the system, and you'll know where you need to sit if you can't see the nameplates in front of you. Next slide, please. So the main thing you'll have to learn is how to speak. Your mics are muted by default, and to turn them on, you press that little button at the bottom center. It looks like a face, and it'll turn red, and you can press it again, and it'll mute you back. You'll also have a little red light at the top left of your unit to know that you're on. And if you look around on the back of the units, there's a little red light there that turns on when your unit's active. We have it set up so there's a maximum of 4 that can be active at a time, and that's just to help with sound quality. If you put too many of these on, you're going to have some feedback issues. So that's going to limit it there. But what we're asking everyone to do is to just be conscious and turn on your mic when you want to speak and turn it off when you're done. That way, the least number of them active is just going to create a much better sound quality for you. Next slide, please. Another nice feature are, like I said, paperless documents. So we're going to load agendas on these if you want to access them digitally. And the way you do that is on the main screen. There's a little paperless icon. Now we've already forced displays to you, so let me turn that off for a second. So, okay, great. So everyone's in a different screen now. I didn't expect this. Whenever you get to the main screen, I'll show you how to do that in a second. There's a little paperless icon, and you'll press that, and it'll bring up a file folder. And you'll be able to go to the remote tab, which is what is on the main system, goes out to everyone. And you'll see the regular agenda and the full agenda with all the backup on there. And if we wanted to send some to individual, that's what the local folder is for. It'll show anything that we specifically sent to one unit. Next slide, please. And I did a quick video here just to show how to use that paperless. So if you could start that video, you can see it's just kind of like a smartphone or a tablet. You can scroll, you can pinch and zoom and pinch and reduce if you need to. Thank you. And then next slide. And then finally, how to get back to everything. On the right side of that bezel in the middle is a little square. That's kind of a home button. And if you press that, it's going to take you back one step wherever you're from. So if you keep hitting the home button, it's going to get you all the way back to that main screen so you can access that paperless agenda. And then the other thing on there is VOD, that's the video. And if you click on that, that's how you can get to the presentations that are up on these screens. You can press that VOD button and start that HDMI on the top left, and it's going to present you whatever's up on these screens. Next slide. And that was a quick overview of the system. I can answer any questions or go over some of those features again if needed.
Any questions for Jason on this? If anything, you could get with him after or during. Thank you very much. So we're gonna go ahead and move on. So we have some exciting announcements. This morning, we want to welcome St. Cloud Councilmember Keith Trace to the MetroPlan Orlando Board meeting. Hey Keith, how you doing? He's the new chairman of the Municipal Advisory Committee. So welcome, and we look forward to working with you for certain. Next, the Central Florida Alliance, MPO Alliance. Is this Gary?
Yes.
Okay. The Central Florida MPO Alliance met on April 9th. Commissioner Moore represented MetroPlan at the meeting and has a report for us this morning. Commissioner Moore.
Yes,
There you
good morning.
go.
Thank
Good
you.
morning. I've lost everybody today. We kind of switched some of our seats.
I know I said I made it to the big table. So anyway, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful meeting. We were talking a lot about trails, and it's always a pleasure to meet some of the leaders from the broader Central Florida area. And so it was a workshop format. And during the meeting, we received updates from FDOT Districts 1, 5, and the Florida Turnpike's Enterprise staff. The presentations included an update on the Coast to Coast Trail project, as well as an update on the Sun Trails funding. We received an overview of the process for adoption of the regional list of priority projects list. And then Mr. Hill gave us a status report on the Regional Transportation Systems Management and Operations Program. And finally, we received a 2021 legislative session update, which is always wonderful, from Mrs. Virginia Whittington. Our next meeting will be July 9th, and we're very pleased to say we will probably all be here and in person. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Commissioner Moore? Next, the Commuter Rail Commission met on April 29th. Mayor Deming chairs that committee and has a report for us. Mayor Deming, good morning.
Okay, I think I successfully turned on the microphone. All right, the Commuter Rail Commission met on April the 29th. The commission received briefing updates from the vice chair of the Customer Advisory Committee and the chair of the Technical Advisory Committee. As part of the agency briefing, the board was informed that ridership is slowly improving, with approximately 2,900 average daily patrons during March, from a low of April of last year of only 1,000 riders a day. Of particular note, Phase 2 North, that's the DeBerry to DeLand phase of the Sunrail or Commuter Rail extension. FDOT will be proceeding with design build contracts with the prospect of starting construction in January of 2022. At one point, that seemed like that was going to be a long time from now, but just about 7 months from now, so soon. And the projected completion date is 2023, at the end of 2023, with ridership starting likely the beginning of 2024. The next Commuter Rail Commission is scheduled for July 29th, at which time we anticipate having a final resolution or term sheet in place between Brightline and the Central Florida Commuter Rail Commission.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Deming. Next, the MetroPlan Powelton Planning Organization Advisory Council. Sorry. That's the MPOAC. I should have stuck with that. Met on April 29th, and Commissioner Reba represents us on that. So Commissioner Reba, you have a report for us?
I do. Good morning. I don't know about this camera view from under, but we met on April 29th at the Marriott over at the airport. We approved the minutes of the January 28th meeting. Jeff Kramer, the MPOAC Interim Executive Director, reported on the MPOAC work program and budget. And many of you may know Jeff Kramer. He's the one that does the training for our MetroPlan board, if you guys have done that in the past. He provided an overview of the 2021 legislative session. This included comments on some of the bills of interest to the state's MPOs. We heard agency reports from FDOT and FHWA. Not surprisingly, the focus of the agency reports was on federal stimulus programs and what to expect. We also heard of the proposed new definitions for MetroPlan statistical areas and urban areas. We had a good amount of discussion on the replacement of the MPOAC executive director. Jeff Kramer from the Center of Urban Transportation Research is serving as the interim executive director. There are some contractual issues of concern on this interim relationship. There is also some discussion of the relationship of the MPOAC executive director and the FDOT and whether that is in the best interest of the MPOs or if that should be changed in some way. We will hear more on this in our next coming meeting. We had an update on the MPOAC Freight Committee, which is now to become the first Freight and Rail Committee. And we heard two presentations, both dealing with future revenue forecasts. The first from the National Association of Regional Councils, and the second one, which was very, very interesting, was the interim executive director on revenue impacts on electric vehicles. This also included some history over the past 10 years of the MPOAC's interest in addressing the declining gas revenue. And we heard Virginia's program, I believe Oregon was another one that was included. It was quite fascinating how they are charging and how that discussion happened. And our next MPOAC meeting is July 29th, 2021. Madam Chair, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Reba. Next, there have been two live virtual sessions of the MPOAC Institute since our last board meeting. And both Commissioner Cardero and Commissioner Reba have had an opportunity to be there. So, Commissioner Cardero, would you like to tell us something about your at the MPOAC and your experience there?
Oh, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I have to say that that weekend training was amazing. I thought it was a training for me by myself. I took it in the office. I didn't want to be like this stuff, but all my questions were answered. The trainers were amazing. They were like nine.
Could you turn on your microphone, Commissioner Cardero? Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I have to say that that training was amazing. All my questions were answered. The trainers were awesome. I took it in my office. I wanted to be by myself in the office, and it was a whole weekend. I mean, it was Friday and Saturday, and I was virtually all the time in the camera. There was a lot of questions that I had on local level and state level, and they were answered as well. We were 9 students, and one of them were from the Panhandle, other from Miami. So it was good. We did a very good weekend there together, you know, knowing each other. And I have to say thank you also to Mayor Demings for appointing me to MetroPlan board, and thank you for the opportunity to take this training. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cardero. That is a good experience. And Commissioner Reba, would you like to add anything?
Yes, good morning. So I took this 2 years ago in person, and then this time I took it online. And I got to tell you, I enjoyed in person because there's nothing like 15 hours straight in front of a computer. But it was such a great refresher. And Jeff Kramer and you guys know a lot of the crew that's part of it. It was just more of a reinforcement and a double education and anything that we missed. I particularly liked the federal level funding where, you know, how that all kind of comes down to the local level, but that team is so impressive and what they did to keep us engaged. You guys know all those polls we used to do on our phones. It was interesting to do them online and watch. And I believe we had about 12 electeds on ours. So a lot of newly elected freshmen, but it was so great to not be the dumbest one in the room. So, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reba. So next, I will recognize our Executive Director, Mr. Harry Huntley, for some announcements.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman Janer and board members. I want to just remind those that are attending virtually to continue to use the raise hands feature. And if you're on the phone only, use the *6 to mute and unmute, *9 to raise and lower your hand. Those of you in the boardroom, as we've announced before, if you need your parking validation, you can do that by texting your name and ticket number to this telephone number, 407-497-1536, and we'll get your parking validated for you. I believe that we have one board alternate attending this morning virtually. I believe that Commissioner Wilson is here representing Orange County in place of Commissioner Bonilla. But we'll find out more about that when we do the roll. Since the March board meeting, we've been very busy preparing applications for additional federal funding, either preparing them ourselves or working with our partners and preparing letters of support on their behalf. First is what we call the COVID relief supplemental appropriations. For that, we've prepared a list of, we MetroPlan have prepared a list of 8 projects to submit for that. We have the community project funding appropriations request. We have prepared a list of 7 projects and provided letters of support for 9 additional projects that have been prepared by our partners. And then under that, that request, we're also looking at the raise opportunity that's out there. Now with this one, we have a little bit more time than we've had with the others. We have until July 12th. But the raise program takes the place of what has most recently been the build grant program. And prior to that, it was known as Tiger. And there were a series of Tiger and build applications. And then in addition, there's the reauthorization this year of the federal transportation bill, and the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee has requested from the members of the House to submit projects to be included as part of that reauthorization as well. And for that, we prepared a list of 15 projects and provided letters of support for 5 additional projects. And just late yesterday, last night, in fact, I received information from the Association of MPOs, the National Association, that 318 House representatives submitted projects and nearly a list of nearly 2,400 projects have been submitted for that. We continue to work with and coordinate with our partners at DOT on stimulus funding. As a matter of fact, this afternoon we'll be having further discussion on that. Pedestrian safety, there was a good deal of discussion on this topic last month, as you recall, the Dangerous by Design report that had come out on the day of the board meeting. And you asked us to take a closer look at that. Mike Wilson will be giving a presentation later this morning. It's on your agenda. But I've had several conversations with others throughout the region on this, including Secretary Perdue, as well as with Secretary Thibault, and their support for an emphasis on safety in the region. Many of the projects that we've submitted under these federal programs that I mentioned have been targeted toward smaller, less expensive improvements dealing with safety. Since our last meeting, the Best Foot Forward has had an event, a successful operation held on Tuesday, March 23rd in Seminole County and Wednesday, March 24th in Orange County. Together, the Orlando Police Department, Castleberry Police Department, and the Seminole County Sheriff's Office enforced 5 crosswalks and issued a total of 182 warnings and citations. The next planned event is for July 27th and 28th, and that will be in each of the 3 counties. Market research. For those of you that have been on the board for a while, you may recall that historically we've done market research every couple of years, and we're about to do it or doing it again to gauge public attitudes about all things transportation, whether it's modes or whether it's funding. But we do that and report out. Our 2021 Regional Transportation Survey opened on May 3rd. And our communications folks have prepared a short 30-second video promotion of that. And we want to play that very quickly for you so you can get it. And we also have copies, colored copies, I understand, of the promotional flyer for this back on the table if you want to grab a few when you leave the meeting this morning and take them back to your offices and to your jurisdictions. That would be helpful. We'd like as many folks as possible to take the survey. We're actively working with many organizations to help spread the word, especially to the underserved communities in our region. So thank you very much to those of you who have already shared it with your newsletters and on social media. The survey explores many topics that include challenges that many Central Floridians might face in their daily travel. There's a new section on safety to measure the attitudes about distracted driving with questions on texting, speeding, close call situations, and recognition of pedestrian safety signage. There's also a new section on technology that gauges public's attitudes and their opinions on driverless vehicles and electric vehicles and such. We expect that to be completed and the results of that survey to be presented to the board at your July meeting. So if you haven't already, there's still time to share that with your constituents, employees, and friends. Other projects that MetroPlan staff are working on include this 10th Street Complete Street Study in the city of St. Cloud. An online survey was conducted throughout April to allow folks, residents of the area, to weigh in on and give us their opinions on that. And I understand that we received nearly 550 responses to that. So a very good response. And the results of that survey will be presented at the next visioning team meeting on that project scheduled for June 7th. Other projects include the Sunrail parking feasibility for stations in Phase 2 South. And then also the Rock Springs Road, Welsh Road, and West Orange Trail extension in the city of Apopka and in unincorporated Orange County. Those projects are underway, and you'll be hearing more about them as we advance them. I attended the Four Corners Transportation Summit on Thursday of last week. A very good event, very well attended. I don't know the head count. I would probably guess somewhere around 150 people or so were there. So that was good attendance. Some comments were made about the joy that people were hearing and the sound of silverware clanking once again at these kind of events. But it was a lot of fun. There were interesting lineup of speakers, including Don Fisher from Osceola County and Byron Brooks from Orange County were speakers at the event. Alex Trauger has been appointed to the statewide Freight Advisory Committee. And that's a big deal. It's a big deal for Alex, and it's a big deal for us. It's a group statewide that advises the DOT central office on all things freight. So good for us and good for Alex. So congratulations go out to Alex on that. The Florida Public Relations Association held their annual awards event on April 13th. And as you are accustomed to hearing, Cynthia and her team brought some awards back to the MetroPlan office. First was the Image Award, and that is the best in category for our annual report. The Image Award for the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan Digital Public Participation. And finally, the grant, what they call the Grand All Image Award, and that is the top award in the entire competition. And that again is for the 2045 Digital Public Information Program, having to do with the new long-range transportation plan. So congratulations to Cynthia, Marianne, and Leilani on a job well done and on that accomplishment. And then occasionally we hear of staff members throughout the region who've been recognized by their peers for good work. And that occurred recently at the DOT Transplex program that they had a series of online programs. Conroy Jacobs, who is an Osceola County employee, was recognized as the 2020 Planning Professional of the Year. That again is a big deal, a statewide competition. Conroy serves on our technical advisory committee here at MetroPlan. So congratulations to Conroy for that accomplishment and that recognition. And then just finally on office procedures, we continue to have the doors closed to walk-ins. We are opening up, more and more people are coming in for the occasional meeting that we will have here, but it will remain closed for now to walk-in traffic. Beginning July 1st, we will resume committee and board meetings here at the office. As you recall, back in November, I believe the board passed a resolution that acknowledged that our committees would continue to meet in virtual workshop sessions through June. And I think that it's just time, given that that's going to expire at the end of next month. It's time for us to get back together and take precautions in doing so, but to do that. But we will continue to offer public participation virtually. In fact, we will encourage, for now, we will encourage the public participation virtually, and we will allow them to attend and make comments virtually for this foreseeable future. And Chairwoman Janer, that completes my announcements this morning.
Thank you. I believe Commissioner Delory had a question for you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Gary, you talked about projects throughout MetroPlan. I just want to make sure that we're looking at not just by county, but for the region. We as a region in the past have done that, and it's paid off big dividends when we looked at big projects for the region. And I'm just hoping that, and I know the Secretary is very much about the region because that's what DOT does. And I want to make sure that we're looking at, beyond the ultimate on I-4, if there is technically something that we should be doing and moving forward from a technical standpoint. I'm just hoping that we are continuing talking to all our regional partners as well as DOT.
We do. We have, I have regular meetings with the DOT leadership. Now it's on my calendar every couple of weeks to have a check-in with them. And then the other projects come off of our list of priority projects, and what the members of the technical advisory committee rank as high priority projects. So that's where we develop that list.
Because we actually did that, I don't remember how many years ago, the entire region. We had representatives from the entire region through MetroPlan actually go up to DC, and we were able to walk the halls literally.
Yeah.
And that's how we got phase 2 South funded. And it would be a great opportunity when that's available for us to position ourselves to big mega projects like that.
I agree. And we continue to have those discussions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Delory. Mayor Nelson, could I ask you to please mute yourself? I also want to give kudos to Cynthia and Conroy on their recognitions. Mute your microphone, Mayor Nelson. Thank you. Just because of that, no more than 4 mics active at a time there. Next, it's my pleasure to recognize Secretary Perdue, and he has some announcements for us.
All right, thank you, Chairwoman Janer. Very happy to be here as we continue to work on and build relationships and partnerships, which are very, very important to us here at DOT. For the reason that Commissioner Delory mentioned, I mean, regional transportation is a major focus, and we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. And so, transportation is really a relationship business. And the closer that we can all work together and forge these partnerships, the more opportunities we're going to be able to take advantage of. And, obviously safety is a huge priority for all of the local agencies in Central Florida, for MetroPlan and also for FDOT. And we've got a lot of challenges ahead with safety, but we are laser focused on it. I would like to say I'm very grateful for Governor DeSantis and the state legislature, for those of you who have been paying attention to that. The legislature, finished the session out, and the budget for FDOT's work program was around 10.26 billion. So we're very happy about that. About 9.4 billion of that is going to projects specifically in our work program. So we're very excited about that. In addition to that, for those of you who saw, the Florida legislature also directed $2 billion of rescue plan money to FDOT's work program. So we're very excited about that opportunity. Again, it's going to be a real opportunity for collaboration. We've already started collaborating with our MPOs, with MetroPlan. We've had several conversations about making sure we're identifying, the right projects that are obviously priorities for the region, that are, able to be advanced or delivered more quickly. And so we've got a lot of opportunities there. We're very excited about that. And obviously I-4 Beyond the Ultimate is a tremendous focus, because it is a a huge need for the Central Florida region. So with that, with our focus on safety, I wanted to ask Lorene Bobo, our Director of Development, to come up and just kind of highlight a few of the initiatives that we're beginning to work on and a few of our accomplishments. I do believe, even when reports come out like Dangerous by Design, one thing that sometimes gets lost is that we actually are doing a lot for safety as a region. I mean, we're all working together and, we're spending a lot of resources on it. We're very, very focused on it. And part of it is figuring out, how to really affect the crash numbers. And I think we all want to do that. And there's this intense focus and pressure on it. And so we're working through that and we're trying to be innovative. And I feel that, we're all working together. So we're hoping to really start impacting those crash numbers. So with that, Lorene, if you would.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary. As Jared said, my name is Lorene Bobo, and I'm the Director of Transportation Development for FDOT's District 5. I'm happy to announce today that District 5 is developing an Office of Safety, and that office will have a safety administrator with a staff. And the goal of the office is to really bring all of these individual efforts that we're doing district-wide and with our local partners kind of up under one umbrella. We're doing good things, but it's a little bit disjointed right now. So how do we bring that together and really move that needle and affect that change? We're still kind of developing the office and everything right now, but soon, hopefully they'll be in place and we'll be able to work together and really make some strides to improving the safety on our transportation systems. And one of the keys to that too is that all of our users need to be taken into account. We've got pedestrians, we've got drivers, we have transit users, we have all of these different people that are using our transportation system. They all matter. How do we make sure that they all are going home to their families every night? So it's going to be exciting. And I'm really looking forward to the collaboration that we will have with folks like yourself around the district. I'd like to talk about a few things that we have already been working on and we will continue to improve upon. Lighting. So lighting our roadways, we have found is a big contributor to especially pedestrian incidents and at intersections and things like that. So since 2017, District 5 has spent nearly $36 million district-wide on 252 projects. Nearly half of those projects, 106 of them, are in Osceola, Orange, and Seminole for about $15 million. And those lighting improvements are at intersections, they're in corridors, they're at mid-block crossings, the places where we're finding the most incidents take place. We need to have those areas lit. The FHWA has found that we can reduce those late night, early morning crashes by 35% just by lighting our intersections alone. They've also shown that 76% of pedestrian fatalities in the US occur in dark conditions. So this is really going to make a difference for our pedestrians. And then at intersections, that overhead lighting is estimated to reduce all types of injury crashes by 27%. So that's a significant number. So the 105-6 projects that I mentioned earlier, we're lighting 330 signalized intersections. So it's a massive effort that's going on. A lot of these projects have already been built, but we still have some more that are in the pipeline. And I'm really excited that that's going to really affect our numbers in a positive way. Another safety effort the department's been working on in the past year or so is called Operation Stride. And STRIDE stands for Statewide Traffic and Railroad Initiative Using Dynamic Envelopes. So I hope if you've been driving around and you cross over a railroad track, you'll see this kind of white striping with crisscross at it. And the intent is to bring more attention to the driver. Hey, don't stop in this area. This is an area, if you stop your vehicle here, there's a chance that you're going to get hit by a train. And the vehicles usually don't win in that situation. So we were challenged by Tallahassee to put dynamic envelopes at every single one of our crossings statewide in 2 years. FDOT did it in 1 year. In District 5, We installed 172 dynamic envelopes at crossings, which is 27% of the statewide numbers. So we had a quarter of the state just here in District 5, and we accomplished that in 12 months during a pandemic, which I thought was pretty impressive. We still made that happen because the challenge was presented to us before everything happened last March. This is another type of safety initiative that the department is taking on and being successful at. So it's very exciting. I'd like to give an update on BTU and projects. So we've been taking the BTU project through what we call a value engineering process to help us find innovative ways to bring those key components of the Beyond the Ultimate project to fruition sooner by finding more bite-sized projects that are lower cost. We can build them faster and bring that needed congestion relief now versus later. This will help us to get to our ultimate configuration. So we're not changing the Beyond the Ultimate project. We're just taking smaller bite-sized pieces of it to make it happen in the end. So as it's been mentioned, there is some funding that's coming down the pipeline. This will allow us to hopefully take advantage of some of that and get some of these projects out on the street sooner rather than later. So thank you very much for the time today. We really appreciate it.
Secretary Perdue, does that conclude, or do you have anything else you want to add?
Thank you, Chairwoman. That concludes it. And obviously, I will answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Any questions for Secretary Perdue? Commissioner Moore?
Thank you, Commissioner. Secretary, I'm sorry for focusing on safety. And I think a lot of the engineering and lighting features will be helpful. Has there been any consideration of looking at driver error and perhaps some legislation to increase the driver ed training right at the local high schools and perhaps working with our senior population? I have certain areas of my district that we know it's a lot of driver error, and we've had some serious fatalities that I think really come back to driver error.
Yeah, that's a great point, Commissioner Moore. And yes, there is a tremendous amount of focus on behavior because, as we've all seen, traffic crashes are largely behavior based. That's why it's really so hard to figure out a perfect solution, right? I mean, because you come up with all these mitigating type implementations to try to affect that behavior. But one big component of safety is education. And so, FDOT spends a tremendous amount of resources on education. We're continuing to focus on that and even advance that even farther, because it really comes down, and we have a huge tourist population in Central Florida. I mean, with our beaches and also with, the attractions, that education component is very, very important. And so, we're very focused on not only educating drivers as early and as often as possible, but also educating the other modes like pedestrians, because pedestrians make a lot of mistakes and errors in judgment calls and those type things. And so really, a real strong push in education is very, very important. That's something we are focusing on.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Perdue. It's always exciting to hear of the updates of everything your department is working on, and we're especially happy to hear about some extra funding coming through the pipe. That always makes us happy here at this organization. So next is time for roll call. Lisa?
Good morning. I will call the roll for the board members that are present here in the boardroom. Commissioner Constantine.
Here.
Commissioner Delari.
Here.
Mayor Demmings.
Here.
Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Commissioner Gomez Cordero.
Here.
Commissioner Janer.
Here.
Commissioner Moore.
Here.
Mayor Nelson.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Trace.
Here.
Commissioner Uribe.
Here.
Mayor Woodruff.
Here.
Commissioner Zimbauer.
Present.
Now I will call the roll for the members that are participating via Zoom. And for the members participating via Zoom, if you could turn your cameras on so that we can confirm that it's you. And if you could go ahead and unmute your mics, which you will find the unmute button on the bottom left side of your toolbar. Mayor Bates.
Here.
Commissioner Booth. Mayor Dyer.
Here.
Mr. Good, Commissioner Ortiz, Commissioner Siplin,
Present.
Commissioner Wilson.
Here.
And now I will call the roll for our non-voting members. Secretary Perdue,
Here.
Mr. Cap,
Here.
Ms. El Badri,
Present.
Mr. Jameson,
Here.
Mr. Muhison.
Present.
Madam Chair, that concludes the roll call, and we do have a quorum physically present.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Appreciate that. Now it's time for agenda review. Mr. Hartman, do you have any changes to our agenda?
I do not, Chairwoman Janer. We can proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to our committee reports. First is our Municipal Advisory Committee. Councilmember Trace.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. The MAC met last week on May 6th in a virtual format. This was a workshop format until we come back in July. We were joined by 4 new members, Winter Park Mayor Phil Anderson, Longwood Commissioner Richard Drummond, Castleberry Mayor David Henson, and Winter Springs Mayor Kevin McCann. This was our first meeting with our new liaison, Alex Trauger. We're excited to have him aboard, and he's doing a great job so far. We had a few items for review and discussion. Our meeting minutes, the DOT TIP amendment that's on the agenda today. We had 3 presentations, 2 of which are on the board today. The board emphasis areas, pedestrian safety trends, and then an update from Link staff on the automated vehicle program, which was really interesting. Our next meeting is June 3rd. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Trace. Next is our Community Advisory Committee, and I wasn't sure if I heard it. Is Ms. Albardi here, or do we have somebody in her place?
Chairwoman Janer, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Sarah Al-Badri.
Okay, hi, I didn't hear you in roll call, sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
All right, well, good morning, Chair and Board. On April 28th, the Community Advisory Committee met in virtual workshop format. While no votes were taken, committee members engaged in discussion with staff and FDOT on several topics. The CAC welcomed 8 new MetroPlan Orlando appointees to our committee, as well as a new appointee from Osceola County. I'm very happy with the participation of many of our new members in question and discussion, even in their first meeting. Members reviewed and discussed an action item on the proposed FDOT amendment to the TIP, which included Sunrail Phase 2 North and 2 other projects. Members asked questions and on some particulars of the amendments, but we had no substantive concerns. The committee heard presentations from MetroPlan Orlando about the board emphasis areas, and we participated in a survey to rank them. Mr. Mike Wilson of MetroPlan Orlando provided CAC members with a very important data-driven presentation on pedestrian safety. As our executive director reminded us today, on the day of our last board meeting, Smart Growth America released its latest Dangerous by Design report. Our MSA again ranked first among the county's largest metros on the Pedestrian Danger Index. As you know, the Orlando area has ranked in the top 3 most dangerous in the nation for the past 12 years. Members posed several questions about what we all in our region can do to promote and create an environment of pedestrian safety. Since it was just announced today, I will say on behalf of the Community Advisory Board, we look forward to how FDOT's District 5 Office of Safety works alongside our jurisdictions in our region for improved pedestrian and bicycle safety. Members heard a presentation on a study of automated vehicles from Lynx and discussed how this might change transportation in Central Florida. Some members of the CAC participated in the initial survey group of this study. Members were pleased with Lynx's attention to different user groups and especially the focus on equitable access during the study. Members look forward to the same level of care and the future implementation of automated vehicles in our transit systems. As always, we appreciate the level of service Lynx provides with this level of resources. Our next CAC meeting is expected to be held on May 26th. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
All right, next time for our Technical Advisory Committee, Mr. Muhisen.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. The Technical Advisory Committee met on April 23rd. We reviewed and discussed the amendments to the Transportation Improvement Plan requested by FDOT under Agenda Item 9A. We also heard presentations. There were 3 of them: the MetroPlan Orlando Board Emphasis Areas, Pedestrian Safety Trends by Mike Wilson, the Lynx Autonomous Vehicle. It was presented by our Tismo chair. We had also some discussion. The pedestrian safety trends presentation sort of struck a chord with the committee. There was a lot of discussion on how poorly the results of the Dangerous by Design report reflected on this area. In response to the report, 5 technical advisory committee members volunteered to serve on an ad hoc committee. We call this committee Dangerous by Design Response Committee. And this committee was formed for the purpose of developing recommendations for improving pedestrian safety in our region. The committee will present their formal recommendations to the full technical advisory committee during our next meeting on May 21st. A group of volunteers met on May 4th to address our area's pedestrian fatality challenges and produced preliminary recommendation to the Technical Advisory Committee. This Dangerous by Design Response Committee initial recommendation is as follows. First, that they recommended that the MetroPlan Orlando creates a working group with a diverse set of members to focus on a number of items. The focus areas are protecting vulnerable road users from serious and fatal injuries. Also with a primary emphasis on the corridor speeds. They recommended the group have representation from a number of constituents, mainly Florida Department of Transportation. They wanted representation from the Technical Advisory Committee as well as the Tismo Committee from MetroPlan. Also requested representations from the Community Advisory Committee, from the Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board, from Lynx as well as Best Foot Forward. Representations also going to be sought from local law enforcement. The final Dangerous by Design Committee report will be presented, as I said earlier, during our formal meeting on May 21st. This concludes my report, Madam Chairman, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Muhajir. Next, it's time for a Tismo committee report. Mr. Jameson.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. The Tismo Committee met on April 23rd. This was in virtual workshop format where items that are being advanced to the board were discussed, but no formal action was taken. The following 2 items were reviewed and discussed: our February 26, 2021 Tismo meeting minutes, and also the FDOT request that the FY 2020-21 through 2024-25 TIP be amended to include the addition of Sunrail Phase 2 North from DeBerry to DeLand, Neptune Road from Parton Settlement Road to US 192, and the railroad crossing on Hester Avenue in Sanford. There were no concerns asked to be advanced to the board. We also received 3 presentations. The first was a presentation on the regional Tismo program by Mr. Eric Hill. The committee was briefed on the regional Tismo planning between the MPOs and the TPOs in the Central Florida mega region. MetroPlan Orlando is leading this effort, supported by the staff. The second presentation was on the I-4 Florida Regional Advanced Mobility Elements Project, which is also known as I-4 Frame. This project will deploy an advanced system of next generation traffic incident management and vehicle to infrastructure technologies along the I-4 corridor from Tampa to Orlando. Our third presentation was an update on the Workforce Task Force by Mr. Eric Hill. This task force is examining the technical skills and the human resource needs in the local transportation industry.
and then working to establish a mechanism to engage technical institutions and high schools to support the future careers within this industry. And that concludes my report, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Jemison. Okay, next, we'll move on to our public comments for our action items. So just as a reminder, please, if you are joining us virtually, use the raise hand feature on the Zoom toolbar. If you are joining us via phone, please press *9. Do we have any speaker cards here?
We do not.
Okay. Do we have anybody that's wishing to make a public comment on an action item that is joining us virtually?
Madam Chairwoman, we have no hands raised, and I do not believe we received any written comments from the public.
Okay, thank you. Having none, we will go ahead and close that section. So, and we have no members of the public right now in person, so we'll move on to our consent agenda, which are items A through G.
Madam Chairman, move to approve consent agenda as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Galari, a second by Commissioner Uribe. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We also have two other action items today. So I'm going to go ahead and call on Mr. Caskey for our first item, which is the FDOT amendment to the 2021, 2024, 2025 TIP.
Okay, good morning, Madam Chairwoman and board members. This amendment this morning includes the Sunrail Phase 2 North project in Volusia County. Of course, that's outside of our region, but FDOT has requested us to include that in our TIP since that is a district-wide project. Then there's a 4-laning project on Neptune Road in Osceola County, and that project is receiving federal SU funds for right-of-way, and that makes that project eligible to receive additional federal funding. And then there is a railroad crossing project on Hester Avenue near Sanford. And you all have the information on these in your agenda packets. So unless there's any questions, we're asking for your approval of the amendment.
Okay, are there any questions? Otherwise, this is a roll call vote. Motion for approval by Mayor Deming. Thank you, Mayor. I was missing the motion, huh? Do we have a second? Okay. Okay, a second by Commissioner Fisher. Okay, now there's a roll call vote.
Commissioner Constantine,
Yes.
Commissioner Delary,
Yes.
Mayor Demmings,
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher,
Yes.
Commissioner Gomez Cordero,
Yes.
Commissioner Jainer,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Mayor Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Trace,
Yeah.
Commissioner Uribe,
Yes.
Mayor Woodruff,
Yeah.
Commissioner Zembauer,
Yes.
Mayor Bates,
Yes.
Mayor Dyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Siplin,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the vote carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have, we're going to call on Mr. Nick Lepp to talk about our board emphasis areas.
Thank you. Good morning. Last month, I previewed with you the concept of moving from our board emphasis areas to our goal areas adopted with our MTP. Next slide, please. And based on the responses that we got last month, I went over and presented this also to all of our committees, and we wanted to look at how they would rank our goals and objectives moving forward. But to recap, historically, we have presented emphasis areas that were developed. Back one more slide, please. I'm sorry. Developed emphasis areas used to help us prioritize project that the board has developed. And we started this about 4 years ago, where the emphasis was looking at more trail connectivity, engaging our younger population, emphasis on complete streets, safety, and connectivities to Sunrail. Next slide, please. Now, these were all attached to our 2040 long-range plan, and with the adoption of our 2045 MTP, or Metropolitan Transportation Plan, we tried to roll a lot of those emphasis areas within our goals and objectives. And those are in categories of health and environment, safety and security, reliability and performance, access, connectivity, and investment in the economy. Each one of these goals have performance measures associated with those that we use to help rank projects for our prioritization. Next slide, please. So as a recap, looking at where the alignment actually occurs, and we do have quite a good coverage of each one of those emphasis areas within our goals. So we were looking to now, instead of each year presenting these emphasis areas and confirming those, use the goals to help weight our prioritization. And we will have a little exercise later for you as a survey. And I also presented the survey to our committees, so we'll see the results from them. Next slide, please. So with each one of those goals, as I mentioned, there is a performance measure attached to them. And with each one of these performance measures is a ranking or a score. That cumulative score goes in and determines which projects meet our highest priority or the most amount of performance measures in our region, and therefore are ranked the highest to move into our transportation improvement program for funding. Next slide, please. These were presented during our MTP process, and what we found is that the overall ranking and consideration of these were pretty close together. So when we developed our cost feasible plan, we didn't use a weighting component. Each goal area was weighted equally as we determined what projects were cost feasible and the priorities of those in the 5-year blocks. But as we move into performance-based planning for our priority list and projects to get into the transportation improvement program, now is where we start defining those a little bit more into annual. Next slide, please. So we also gauged the public on this information of our goals and objectives, kind of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, to see where the sentiments were beforehand. And obviously before the pandemic, there was a lot of focus on access and connectivity, as well as investment in the economy, with safety, security, and then all the way down through health and environment. After the pandemic, we started seeing some of this shift, obviously with more focus on investment in the economy with the pandemic, and the health and environment, with access, reliability, and safety actually moving now towards the bottom. Next slide, please. So I'm going to, you had everybody that's in the room was just handed out a QR code to scan in for a survey. The rest, we were going to have a survey dropped into the chat for those that are participating virtually. If you want to take out your phones and be interactive, we're going to ask for you to rank these goal areas. And just a simple exercise, moving your top goal, obviously up to the top, with your least goal down to the bottom. That does not mean that the least ranked goal isn't going to get any points. We're just trying to emphasize certain goal areas as we prioritize projects, but each one of these goals is a priority with those measures going in to help improve our system. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we presented this to our Tismo and TAC committee and CAC and the MAC, and here's how they started ranking them. Again, a little bit different order. Safety and security popped up at the highest with Tismo, TAC, and the Municipal Advisory Committee, where the Citizens Advisory Committee ranked that a little bit lower with a more focus on access, connectivity, and health and the environment. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to ask for you to rank those results. Unfortunately, we won't have a live result, so I will present those to everybody afterwards, after the meeting. But here are the goal areas, which safety, security, reliability, performance, access, connectivity, health and environment, and investment in economy. And each one of those has that evaluation criteria or performance measure. So if you would rank safety and security higher, then the points associated with crash rates, fatal and serious injury rates, pedestrians and bicycles, and evacuation routes would have more weight within our prioritization, and projects there would start moving up, and so on and so forth for the other goal areas as you rank them. So we are looking to take this information and use that within our prioritization process, which you should be starting to see over the next couple months. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions, and I look forward to sharing the results afterwards.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Lepp on this?
So what we're looking for actually is a motion to use goal areas as weighting for prioritization and shift from the board emphasis areas that you have adopted historically in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Leff. We have a question before that. Commissioner
Okay.
Delari.
Thank you. I have a question first, Nick. When it comes to safety, there's really, in my mind, two different types of safety, even though it's safety is one big issue. It comes to the most vulnerable, people that don't have a lot of metal around them. And then there's the cars, so it's really pedestrians or bicyclists or walkers is one category. And then people in automobiles is another category, even though safety as a whole is one. But do you look at it that way or not?
Right now, the current methodology would have all of those safety performance measures in one weighting group, but this is a math exercise and the discretion of the board as we're presenting it. So it can be chopped up whichever way the board wishes to proceed through this, because we already have our performance-based process. This is just an additional mathematical step to help weight annually. So that can be done.
Would it be hard to do that?
No, it would not be hard to do that.
Okay. And so then I'd like to ask the board that if we're going to talk about safety, there really, I think safety as a whole is important, but there really should be two different categories. One from the vulnerable, which is pedestrians as a whole, and then one is automobiles, because there's two different levels of it in my mind. I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
Cyclists, add cyclists to the.
Cycle and pedestrian, because I look at, if you're in a car, you got a lot of metal around you. If you're on a walking or a bicycle, you don't. And I would think that if you're a pedestrian or a cyclist, that you're more vulnerable for that death or accident than you are a car, because cars have airbags, seat belts, all the other stuff that goes along with it. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I'd like to see safety broken up into two different categories.
Mr. Huntman, could I ask you, right now, with them all in one category, when we're looking at the projects, we look at a general safety goal, whether it be pedestrian or vehicular. What will that do to our vote and our timeline in the process right now?
Nick, can you
Yeah.
discuss the timeline and the impact that splitting that up between vehicular safety and vulnerable user safety, what that would do to your schedule?
It actually wouldn't impact it at all. We're in the process of developing those priority rankings as a draft to send out to the committees to review prior to us coming back for adoption in July. So we do have plenty of time to do that. What it would do is, as a ranking of the goal areas, we would then just split out the vulnerable user category or performance measure and apply possibly a different weight for that one, which would just rank those projects or those corridors that had a high vulnerable user incident rate more so than just the overall crash rate, as was mentioned. So it can be done if that is the decision of the board.
Madam Chairwoman. So then, Nick, the approval of the board, this action item today would wait until next month?
I could get the motion and then we can start working on that through the prioritization with the motion. Right now, the way we have our prioritization is we would do the performance-based planning and either keep them equally weighted as they are today, or weight the projects based on the board's recommendations that come out of this, this meeting. Or I could come back later with some examples of what that would look like.
Correct now.
Madam Chairman, could we not just make an amendment right here as the board today for that purpose in an attempt to expedite the process rather than hold it up?
You can, yeah.
I also like to add, I think that the pedestrian safety is very valid, knowing what we're ranked. But I do believe that if we're combining vehicular and pedestrian or bicycle, we're really not getting an accurate idea of what we're going to propose here. So I kind of agree, but I think we should do an amendment. I wouldn't want to delay it any further.
I don't want to delay it.
Yeah. So if it's not too much trouble to him, I would agree that We added.
So Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve this, but have a subcategory of the pedestrian and vehicular safety issues as we discussed here, and let staff work through those issues.
Okay, we do have a motion with the proposed amendment with a by Commissioner Delory with a second by Commissioner Sembauer. Any other discussion on this? Okay, it is a voice vote. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we do have information act items for acknowledgement. Could I have a motion to acknowledge those? We have a vote, a motion by Commissioner Uribe, a second by Mayor Deming. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Next, it's time for presentations. We do have two presentations this morning. Our first presenter is Mr. Wilson.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman, sorry, and board members. As noted earlier, the Dangerous by Design report came out the same day as your last board meeting, and you had a number of interesting questions, both about the report itself and about our problem overall. So I'm hoping to address those questions this morning. What I'm going to address is, first off, is the pedestrian danger index and how that formula works and how it might change if different aspects, different components of that formula were changed. I'll talk briefly about FDOT's safe system approach and also about the pedestrian crossing laws, who yields to whom and when, and then spend a good bit of time talking about the factors that contribute to our high pedestrian fatality issue. So first off, the pedestrian danger index, it's a fairly simple formula. You start off with the number of pedestrian fatalities, and the report has generally been using a 10-year batch of those, and then divide that by the population, normalized for a 100,000 population. And that in turn is then divided by the percentage of people walking to work. The numbers that we see in the Dangerous by Design report include Lake County as part of the Orlando metro area. The numbers that I'm going to be showing you are calculated just for our 3-county area based on this formula. So one question was, well, what is the impact of our visitor population? We have roughly, or at least before COVID, had roughly 200,000 additional people, visitors in our metro area on any average day. And so if we added that to our pedestrian danger index, we'd see a 9% change in that number. Not a great change, but still somewhat significant. But when we look at the crash side of this, it's interesting that still the majority of our pedestrian fatalities involve people who reside in our metro area. You see 80% nearly residing within our 3 counties, another 14% still in Florida, only 4% living in the US outside of Florida. And for the 2 years through which we had this detailed data, we had 0 people from outside the US involved as pedestrian fatalities. The other factor was looking at the walk to work rate. Over the course of the past 10 years, and you'll see this grouping of the first 3 years, 2011 through 13, and the last 3 years, 2017 through 19, throughout the remainder of this presentation, we had a walk to work rate of roughly 1.1%. That has increased to roughly 1.7%, which is about a 20% increase in walking to work, but we still had a 15% increase in our pedestrian danger index because of the increase in crashes. Now, if we had doubled our walking to work during that period without having an increase in crashes, we would have seen a reduction of 27% in our pedestrian danger index. But it, generally doesn't work that way, right? You get more pedestrians and you get more risk and more crashes. It's really only when we decrease the fatalities themselves that we see a significant change. So if we had started off, excuse me, with the roughly 60 fatals per year at the beginning of the decade and had dropped that by 20%, then we would have seen a 42% decrease in our pedestrian danger index. So how do we get there? How do we bring that fatality number down? Well, very fortunately, Florida Department of Transportation, with its new highway safety plan, has introduced what we call the safe system approach. And a really key aspect of this is that it acknowledges that humans make mistakes. Yes, we do want to reduce the incidence of those mistakes, through education and enforcement, but there are some mistakes that are just innate. But when a vulnerable person makes a mistake, then the outcomes are going to be much more serious, of course. So what are the factors that that contribute to these fatalities? First off is the failure to yield on the part of either the motorist or the pedestrian. Darkness, we have seen, is another big one. Distraction is becoming an increasing issue. And impact speed is the most important because of the impact to the human body. So before I get into the crash data and we talk about failure to yield, well, it's important to understand what the rules of the road are. So crossing the street, pedestrians are permitted to cross mid-block in most circumstances. And that's because the law says that only if there are adjacent signalized intersections are pedestrians prohibited from crossing the street. So you see in this graphic here, we have 3 intersections, 2 of them with traffic signals. The one in the center just stop controlled for the side streets. In this circumstance, this pedestrian is permitted to cross the street, provided that he or she yields to approaching vehicles on the road. Note also those green stripes there, those are unmarked crosswalks. So it's also important to recognize that crosswalks are not just paint on the pavement, they're also legally defined as the continuation of the lateral lines of the sidewalk across the intersection, across the roadway at the intersection. And so a motorist would have to yield irrespective of whether that that crosswalk is marked or not. Now, here's the situation of, between adjacent signalized intersections. In this case, pedestrians would be prohibited from crossing unless there was a marked crosswalk, in which case the regular crosswalk rules would apply. So getting back to this idea of humans make mistakes. So we have 3 road users here that are all preparing to cross the main line of this highway. All 3 of them have to yield to that red car that's approaching in the travel lane. If let's say this blue van pulled out from a driveway and caused a crash, we wouldn't say that, well, you can't pull out of driveways anymore. What we do is we look at, well, what are the other contributing factors? Is there a sightline issue? Is the lighting right? Is the speed appropriate for this corridor? We look at these things if these crashes become more and more of a problem. So the same is true for pedestrians. This is normally a legal crossing. A pedestrian can make a mistake and be involved in a crash. So looking at the factors of how these crashes are happening, far and away, our increases have been an issue of darkness. We can see here that our crashes are becoming more fatal as the decade has progressed, from 14% fatal to 21%, and a 71% overall increase in fatal crashes. Whereas with daytime crashes, you see only 6 and 7%. And keep in mind that our population increased by 14% during this same period. When we look just at the pedestrian failure to yield mid-block crashes, these have become even more severe. You can see an 84% increase in these crashes, while at the same time, we actually had a decrease in these types of crashes for daytime, although still an increase in fatal daytime crashes. What was surprising is that streets with street lighting is where we saw the biggest increase. Now, this is not because of the street lighting, it's rather in spite of it, but nearly 150% increase on lit streets. So the picture here is that overall, pedestrian failure to yield is actually reducing as a crash type overall. So pedestrians are doing a better job. It's just that the outcomes are getting worse at nighttime. Looking at some of the other factors, distracted driving, looking at motorist failure to yield to the pedestrian, that increased by nearly 120% over the past decade, while distracted driving nighttime overall, again, involving a pedestrian, up by 27%. Just for reference, smartphone ownership increased from less than half at the beginning of the decade to more than 3/4 now. So while the distracted driving data that you see here does not explicitly represent smartphones, it is included in there. We'd have to do a little deeper dive in order to get that data. But also, you look at the numbers are relatively small. And it's rare that we can actually determine that distraction was an issue, and more specifically that a smartphone was. Alcohol and drugs, interestingly, we see a decline over the past decade, but at the same time, we had an increase in hit and run crashes. So that may be masking perhaps a status quo for alcohol and drug related crashes. Looking at motorist failure to yield, this was somewhat surprising to me that we were seeing an increase, considering all that we've done with the Best Foot Forward program in training drivers that they have to yield. But then keep in mind, we do have the distraction issue that has that we definitely see an increase there. This may also be reflective of perhaps better enforcement, that we've trained many law enforcement to be better informed on pedestrian rules of the road. And so we may be seeing better reporting in that respect. That may be responsible for some of that increase as well. For those who saw my presentation a couple of years ago on fatalities overall, this is really the crux of it. That 82% of our pedestrian fatalities, where the pedestrian is crossing the road, are happening at night, and equally 82% are happening on road speed posted at 40 to 50 miles per hour. Which brings me to an observation that I've made at some prior meetings, but some of you haven't seen this, that when I go to other parts of the country, I routinely find myself on roads where I think, gee, if I was back in Orlando, I know I'd be driving 5 or 10 miles an hour faster than I am here. And so here's some examples of some roads that a couple of which I've actually been on. And so you see the local example on the top, Lee Vista Boulevard, and you can see the measurements here. So the median to curb width, for example, the amount of pavement on one half of the road is actually 2 feet less on the Orlando example than in the Montana example. And yet, as you see, 10 miles per hour slower posted speed in Montana. Another example with US 441 in Apopka on the top, and US 12 in Missoula, Montana on the bottom. Here in the Montana example, we've actually got 8-foot paved shoulders, most likely used for storing snow in the winter. So we have a much wider road, and yet again, similar type of land use, similar type of roadway, and yet 10 miles per hour slower. And then a final example, US 192 in Kissimmee, a 6-lane arterial, and Westheimer Road in Texas and Houston, and this is actually 8 lanes. A little bit wider, and as you can see, similar in the sense that the sidewalk is right up next to the curb, and that we've got again similar type of land use. So how do we address this issue? It bears some exploration as to why it is that we are posting our roads at higher speeds than other parts of the country. And that's something we're going to look at into with more detail. So we have this overall combination of factors of darkness, distraction, and speed. There is an additional factor that had been identified in the Dangerous by Design report and some other reports, that we have more and more trucks and SUVs on the road and fewer regular passenger cars. These larger vehicles tend to hit a pedestrian at a higher point, which results in more severe injuries. Now, that's not something we can affect at the local level. That's something that's going to have to be addressed at the national level. And I didn't want to get too much into countermeasures here today, but here's one that sort of addresses this combination of nighttime and speed. There is the ability to post a lower nighttime speed. This is actually done on US 1 in the Florida Keys, and it's done to protect the endangered key deer. Well, the key deer evidently have the same challenge that the human pedestrians do, is that they can have a hard time judging the speed of approaching vehicles at night. And then the drivers have a hard time seeing the deer. So if we get the drivers to slow down, it gives the deer a chance to get out of the way. I just want to leave with this final slide on where the crashes are happening by jurisdiction. And as you can see, Orange County and Orlando sort of leading the way there on a percentage. And at the bottom part of the slide, I've sort of broken up the unincorporated Orange County and City of Orlando by the areas that have the greatest increase within them. So at this point, I'll stop and take any questions from board members.
Okay, any questions? All right, we will now.
Madam Chairwoman, excuse me. I think we do have a question from Commissioner Wilson, who is participating online.
Okay, Commissioner Wilson, you are recognized.
That's okay. It was actually answered in the next slide. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Commissioner Delara, you had a question.
Mike, I appreciate your presentation, very informative. And in your research, I understand that the lighting of the road is part of the issue. One of the things that I found out, because I have an aging parent, when it comes to the older population, light quality is really the key. And when it comes to light quality, I had to change out all the light fixtures in his house because he couldn't see. And once I changed it to a high Kelvin scale, like 3000, he could actually see. So I'd be curious if the Kelvin scale on the lights are set to a point that it actually lights up the road, but it doesn't help people see.
So if I remember my lighting numbers correctly, a higher Kelvin is a bluer light.
No, it's actually it's a whiter light.
It's a whiter, well, whiter, yeah. So it's less yellow, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so, and that's actually what we're getting with the new LEDs. So we should be seeing an improvement into that. But I will look into the age of drivers and see if that is, see if we see any trend data in that.
Just be careful with the LED, because I've had to actually look at the detail of the LEDs, because a lot of times you go to Lowe's or Home Depot, they want to sell you the LEDs at about 2500 on a Kelvin scale, which is not the whiter light. It's more of a blue gray light.
Right.
just be curious to see if there's any correlation, that's all.
Thank you. That's a good point.
And Madam Chair, I
Yes,
do
Mayor
have a
Denham.
question. I think a great report, an update. I didn't see a copy of it in my material. I would like to get a copy of it if possible, but I think the approach we've used is kind of four-pronged. One is to address these issues through infrastructure improvement. I think through public awareness campaigns, through enforcement. And then I'm going to say the fourth category perhaps is through the use of technology, through improvements either in the automobiles, and I think there's an opportunity to even improve technology for pedestrians. Some of the pedestrians who are crossing roadways mid-block, crossing at intersections when they shouldn't be because they're distracted. You mentioned the use of smartphones has improved. And there may be a way to even improve the technology for pedestrians where if a pedestrian is walking and they're on their phone, that they are somehow alerted that they are approaching an intersection or that there's traffic nearby to be aware of. We have improved the technology in the automobiles significantly to ensure that the drivers are not distracted. But I think there's an opportunity to improve through the use of technology, an alert system, so pedestrians are not distracted. And so I just share that with you. Obviously, a lot of that will have to be approached from the national level, to make some requirements of cellular phone manufacturers or carriers to help keep the pedestrian safer. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Mayor Denham. Okay, seeing no other commissioner users.
Mr. Wilson, thank you for the presentation, and I'd also like to request a copy. But I wanted to discuss, when you talk about training pedestrian and drivers, one of the things I've noticed, there's been an enormous investment on Orange Blossom Trail for the crosswalk where they press the button and it flashes. And we were out there when they initiated with the Orange County Sheriff's Office. But what I've noticed in time is that the drivers are now starting to ignore that. They will blatantly drive through a red light, or if a pedestrian is walking too slow or they haven't made it to their spot. Have we ever considered going to the state as far as red light cameras for those that do violate the crosswalk? Or I just kind of feel that it's become normal and it's not respected like a real light. And it's growing and growing, and I'm concerned. I know we try to focus on the pedestrian and try and encourage that safety, but if the driver doesn't respect the light or the crossing, is there any way that the state would look at some sort of penalty for doing that, especially when it's blatant? I just can't even believe sometimes that cars just don't even consider it a red light.
Well, I will share that with our Best Foot Forward group because, as you know, they're routinely doing enforcement. And I think it'd be good for us to go out and take a look at see how frequent these violations are to kind of get a handle of how productive the enforcement can be within person. As you say, an automated system would be even more effective, but we know the challenges with that.
Commissioner Moore, and that would be our last question, and we'll have to move on to our next presentation.
Yes, the one thing that was mentioned in the report was the speeds. And I was curious if there's a state mechanism where we could implement some of those recommendations with the nighttime, because I know even in our county that you have to have speed study every time you try to lower speed, and we get backed up. I have requests all the time. That's probably the number one complaint I get in my office is folks driving too fast and being concerned about speeds in their area, which obviously are more local roads. But I was just curious if there's a quicker way to get through these speed studies and lower speed limits.
Well, when it comes to,
Actually, I'm going to ask Mr. Hudman to weigh in a second on that because we do have to move on. However, I would also like to request for every member to receive a copy of that presentation. So go ahead. Mr. Wilson, go ahead if you could address Commissioner Moore's question.
yeah, I think that's just a discussion we need to have with FDOT as to, the difference between how we do speed studies for routine posted speeds and then how that might vary for a nighttime speed reduction. And that's really in their area of expertise and of policy oversight.
And I'm just going to weigh in that would be probably significantly more expensive. I don't know how feasible it would be to do that on most of our roads because whereas a street sign, it's a metal post. And when you do that switch, you see there's electrical involved. So that would be kind of an expensive endeavor, I would think, but something definitely looking into maybe on more problem roads or roads with high fatalities or something. So maybe that's a conversation for us at another date and time. So we will go ahead and move on now to lots of good information there. Our presentation of the FY 2021 actually legislative session. And we do have Mr. Matthews with us from Peebles, Smith and Matthews.
Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. Pleasure to be with you all virtually this morning from Tallahassee. I have with me my colleague, Angela Dreswecki. We have had the pleasure of representing MetroPlan Orlando for quite some time and appreciate the continued opportunity. Want to give you, and I'll be efficient with our time. I know that you are likely moving on and ending your meeting after this legislative update. I wanted to start, I'm going to talk a little bit about the themes of 2021. I will hand it over to Angela, who has some good news on the Best Foot Forward program, which this board tasked us with seeking a legislative appropriation in 2021. She'll talk very briefly about the overall budget and then hone in on bicycle safety legislation that passed this session. I'll come back and follow up quickly with a couple bills that passed, a couple bills that failed that you all had spoke about in the fall of 2020. Not surprisingly, the biggest theme in the 2021 legislative session was COVID-19 and pandemic related, either directly or tangentially to the pandemic and the experience of all Floridians over the course of the last year. Now, what that did essentially was narrow the focus of the legislators to, again, themes or items, policies that were directly affected. So we're talking business and healthcare COVID liability protections, vaccine passports, healthcare funding. And then we got into a little bit more of what we would call the hyper-partisan issues because Florida and Tallahassee are very similar to DC in that the partisanship is fairly extreme. So then we had large pockets of the legislative session discussing data privacy, social media deplatforming, elections, et cetera. And now the reason for that is obviously we enter 2022 very shortly. We have an election year. We have a governor in this state who has been talked about in national circles as a potential presidential candidate in 2024. And quite frankly, the Republican-dominated legislature did the governor a number of favors from a policy issue leading up to that 2022 election. Secondly, I want to talk about the theme, really because of COVID, the lack of access. In a normal session, we obviously have significant and frequent engagement directly with members of both the House and the Senate. You'll recall we discussed in the fall, the Senate was completely shut down. There were no lobbyists or outside visitors allowed into the Senate office building for the entirety of session. Now, the House, depending on the member, you could seek a meeting request. Their aide would come down to the lobby. Capitol Police would then let you in. You'd be escorted to their room or their office and then escorted out of the building. So the normalcy of advocacy was completely different. It truly was a session unlike any other. And I think that, quite frankly, that the lack of access hindered from a general government perspective, allowed legislators to act with a little bit of freedom, particularly as it relates to general government government legislative preemptions. Normally, lobbyists and advocates, again, by having the direct access and not in any confrontational way, shape, or form, but largely the discussion can be had in person where a substantive policy debate occurs, and normally good policy wins the day. I think that was a little bit different in 2021, quite frankly. And then finally, the third theme, before I kick it over to Angela, not surprisingly, the influx of federal dollars from the American Rescue Plan. When we start talking about anywhere from $8 to $10 billion coming into the state, resulting in that $101 billion state budget, which is the largest in history, there are going to be some effects of that. So Angela's going to talk briefly about Best Foot Forward and bicycle safety.
Good morning, Chairwoman and board members. As Ryan mentioned, we do have good news as it relates to the Best Foot Forward program. Our appropriations request is funded in the state budget at $100,000, which was the amount that we requested. Representative Arrington and Senator Stewart were our sponsors for the project, so obviously we owe them a big thank you for all of their hard work along with ours on the project. The requested funds will be used to further expand the program in the Central Florida area. And the only other thing I would mention as it relates to Best Foot Forward is the General Appropriations Act, Senate Bill 2500, has not been signed by Governor DeSantis yet, and individual projects can be vetoed. So as we continue on, we'll continue meeting with governor staff and to ensure final approval of the Best Foot Forward appropriations request. And moving on to talk about the state budget just kind of as a whole, I don't want to repeat too much of what Secretary Perdue said, but as Ryan mentioned, the spending plan for fiscal year 21-22 totals $101.5 billion, which includes approximately $6.7 billion in federal funding from the American Rescue Plan. And this represents a 10.1% increase or $9.3 billion over the current year budget. And the largest increase in spending is to the Health and Human Services budget, followed by education. And then I would mention that DOT's budget for fiscal year 21-22 is approximately $10.26 billion. And that's slightly, the current year is just slightly more at $10.35 billion. And as Secretary Perdue said, there's approximately $9.4 billion for the work program. The budget also includes $89.5 million in funding for local transportation initiative projects. And this is the pot of money that the Best Foot Forward project was funded out of. Additionally, there's $65.9 million in the budget for grants for the Transportation Disadvantage Program. And the current year, there's about a little more, it's closer to $70 million in the budget. And the last thing I'll mention as it relates to transportation funding is of the nearly $6.7 billion in funding from the American Rescue Plan included in the budget, as Secretary Perdue said, there's $2 billion allocated for the State Transportation Trust Fund, and that's to offset revenue losses associated with the pandemic. And from these funds, $1.75 billion must be used on state highway system projects, and with a priority on restoring funding for projects in the work program that were deferred or deleted this past year. And the remaining $250 million was allocated for grants for port operations. Now I'll switch gears a little bit. And as Ryan mentioned, I was going to talk about bicycle and pedestrian safety, specifically House Bill 605 and Senate Bill 950 by Representative Penchofsky and Senator Book, which did pass this legislative session. And the bill changed quite a bit through the process. But the bill, I'll just quickly run through what it does. Several issues relating to bicycle and pedestrian safety. The bill provides that the driver of a vehicle overtaking a bicycle or other non-motorized vehicle or an electric bicycle occupying the same travel lane must pass at a safe distance of not less than 3 feet. Or if such movement can be safely accomplished, must remain at a safe distance behind until the driver can safely pass. And these requirements do not apply when the bicycle occupies a separate bicycle lane. The legislation also requires DHSMV to provide an awareness campaign informing the public about the safety precautions that must be taken when overtaking a bicycle. The bill also requires 25 questions in DHSMV's test bank to address bicycle and pedestrian safety. Additionally, the bill provides that no passing zones do not apply to drivers who safely and briefly drive to the left of center of the roadway to overtake a bicycle and require a vehicle making a right turn while overtaking a bicycle proceeding in the same direction to do so only if the bicycle is at least 20 feet from the intersection. There's also requirements in the bill for bicyclists. The bill prohibits bicyclists in a bike lane from riding more than two abreast. Where bicycle lanes exist, bicycles may ride two abreast if both are able to remain within the bike lane. If the bicycle lane is too narrow to allow two bicyclists to ride two abreast, they must ride single file and within the bike lane. Lastly, I would just say the bill provides that when stopping at a stop sign, bicyclists in groups after coming to a full and complete stop may proceed through the stop sign in a group of 10 or fewer at a time. And again, this legislation did pass this session, and we worked extensively with Representative Penchowski and her staff, but ultimately an amendment that we were seeking, that would have required a motorist to vacate the lane when passing a bicyclist, if there's more than one lane proceeding in the same direction. That amendment language was unfortunately not accepted. But I will turn it back over to Ryan now, and he'll discuss some other policy bills that passed and failed this session.
And Madam Chair, just a couple more to run through. We had over 3,100 bills filed during the 2021 legislative session. Ultimately, 275 passed and are awaiting the governor's signature. Some of those bills that did pass, Senate Bill 100, which was known to you all as former President Galvano's main priority of MCORS. Largely, Senate Bill 100 scrapped the MCORS plan. Specifically, it scrapped directly the arterial highway from Collier to Polk County. They are moving forward. DOT is moving forward through the legislation, connecting the turnpike west to the Suncoast Parkway. But again, largely the MCORS project has changed significantly from just 2 years ago. The next bill I'll talk about is Senate Bill 44 by Senator Wright, dealing with drones. Senate Bill 44 provided additional exemptions or exceptions to the statutory ban on the use of drones. For transportation purposes, the bill will allow law enforcement agencies to assist and utilize drones to assist with traffic management. So that is something that this board has paid attention to over the last couple of years. Senate Bill 566 by Senator Perry deals with motor vehicle rentals. This is the Toro type peer-to-peer vehicle rental legislation. It did pass this year. It put in insurance and operational requirements for those type of transactions that occur, and again, passed fairly easily through the legislature. House Bill 839 deals with the express preemption of fuel retailers. This was one of the larger local government preemptions this year. This one specifically and expressly preempts a county or municipality from prohibiting the siting, development, or redevelopment of a fuel retailer, a gas station, effectively. And this was one of the host of or suite of large-scale preemptions that actually did occur during the 2021 legislative session. The last bill I'll talk about that actually passed before I move on to 4 bills that did not pass the legislature this year was Senate Bill 1126, which was a large-scale Department of Transportation piece of legislation, specifically for MetroPlan's purposes. In 1126, the issue of most importance was a date was moved with which MetroPlan and other MPOs would submit their list of priority projects to DOT from September 1st to August 1st. So that's the most pertinent application for MetroPlan's purposes of Senate Bill 1126. A couple of bills that we worked on directly that did not pass in the 2021 legislative session. Senate Bill 1494 and House Bill 1217 we managed to get Representative Daley from Broward County and Representative Mooney from Key West actually to file legislation that would allow for virtual meetings to continue to take place during a declared state of emergency. Ultimately, that bill did not pass. From what we were told is that leadership did not want to allow for an expansion of local government authority to meet virtually because of some of the actions that the governor and others saw as unnecessary that local governments took during the pandemic. So that was something that was certainly unfortunate that did not pass during the 2021 legislative session. Going back to Mike's presentation just prior to ours, Senate Bill 1412 by Senator Perry and House Bill 1113 by Representative Fine dealing with traffic and pedestrian safety. This is a multi-year effort to discuss mid-block crossings in the legislature. And what this bill would have done would have required DOT to seek federal Department of Transportation approval to allow for red rectangular rapid flashing beacons as opposed to yellow. Representative Fine has filed this bill for the preceding 2 years, resulting out of a fatality, a child fatality in Brevard County. And his opinion is that the yellow rapid flashing beacons do not provide enough signal to a driver to actually stop for a pedestrian crossing. This bill passed the House. It did not pass the Senate. Largely, the opponents of this bill have focused on the fiscal impact because local governments would have had to remove the yellow rapid flashing beacons and replace them with red, which would have, for some localities, would have resulted in a significant financial cost. Regional Planning Council, Senate Bill 62, there was an attempt to repeal regional planning councils across the state of Florida in 2021. That piece of legislation failed. We had a couple of pieces of legislation, dealing with electric vehicles filed by Senator Brandis. Senator Brandis over in Pinellas County has been one of the thought leaders on electric vehicles throughout the state. Senate Bill 138 that he filed would have established the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Grant Program to provide financial assistance for installation of EV charging infrastructure. And then Senate Bill 40 would have allowed for the collection of fees to the state for those electric vehicles. Now that's a lot at one time. We do have a written report that we have submitted to Virginia, and I'd be remiss to say that we love working with Virginia. She does a very good job for MetroPlan and is our direct communicator during the craziness of session. I'll just state briefly, moving forward, legislature is actually back in Tallahassee Monday, May 17th. Now that's a special session to deal with the Seminole Compact and gaming legislation. So transportation issues will not be discussed. But as we move forward in the 2022 legislative session, a couple big things are occurring. It's a redistricting year. So obviously lines are going to be drawn for seats in both the House, Senate, and congressional districts. We also have the election year where we can anticipate again some more extreme partisanship occurring. So to plan for MetroPlan's purposes, we likely will be back in Tallahassee for legislative committee weeks in September of this year in the fall for that start to January 11th of 2022 for the 2022 legislative session. And Madam Chair, with that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very, very much. That was certainly a lot to discuss. So we will now move on to our public comment period. Do we have any public comments from people virtually?
Madam Chairwoman, I do not see any hands raised on the public side, and we do not have any written comments submitted.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next meeting is Wednesday, June 9th at 9 in the morning. And seeing no hands raised, we are adjourned. Thank you.